Hey everyone, before we get started I have a small announcement to make. This is the final episode of the Rebellion Brewing Podcast. When I pitched the idea of this show 5 years ago, the goal was to introduce the audience to new beers and tell the story about brewers and craft beer in Saskatchewan. The goal was to connect the craft beer community together and share my excitement about beer with you. 234 episodes later, I'm proud to say I only missed one deadline in 5 years when I had laryngitis. I believe we crafted a high-quality show that was easy to listen to. I want to personally thank my friends at the CBC, including Sam McKeag and Taryn Cochran, who helped foster a local Saskatchewan podcast community. Their training and networking events were invaluable. This show would be lesser without their wise counsel and advice. I also want to thank my alma mater, the University of Regina Journalism School, including Leighton Burton, Robin Lawless, Patricia Elliott, Sheila Coles, Karen Briere, and more. I will always hold a space in my heart for journalists and the great work they do. Through this podcast, I have strived in my own small way to make them proud by producing a high-quality, professional, ethical, and entertaining show. And lastly, I want to thank you, the Rebels, those who tuned in each week to listen to my bullshit. You're the best. Thanks. Hey Rebels, my name is Matthew Barton. Welcome to the Rebellion Brewing Podcast. Fall is my favorite time in beer. Whether it's a Thanksgiving meal or a tour at the hop farm, there's something special that happens at the end of summer. Rebellion just launched 3 new seasonal beers, and Mark Heise is here with me today to taste and talk about all of them. So let's get into it. Mark, welcome to the show.
Happy as always to be here.
How's it going, man?
It's going great. Yeah.
I kept thinking about this episode and trying to figure out what it is that makes fall so special, so important to me. And I could rant and rave about going to the hop farm and the fresh hops that hop into the beers. But then I was like, no, I want to hear what Mark likes best about his year in beer.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely something to that about being from Saskatchewan and relating to harvest time. It's always a special time of year leading up to Thanksgiving. The changing of the leaves, all that kind of stuff. Just a bit of a reflection point. Summer is amazing for beer. It's amazing for beer sales. But I love the idea of drinking seasonally, and so in summer you're usually drinking those lighter, crisper beers. And as much as I love those, it's kind of nice to just switch gears and move on to something else. And so it's always a special treat to start to think about that. I think it's no coincidence that Oktoberfest, which is I wouldn't even say arguably, it is the biggest beer festival in the world, happens in fall. And so there's just lots to celebrate and get excited about, and there's beers that just kind of just fit with that theme of the leaves turning colors, the beer starts to turn colors, and just interesting flavors. So it's definitely still beer season, I guess is my point.
I always agonize about why aren't there more dark beers? Why can't we have darker beers? I understand that in summer people want lighter stuff, but I think because of Rebellion, because of learning all that I have, that's what I crave, and that's what I'm drawn to.
Yeah, there's amazing flavors in dark beer, and when I would say the microbrewery early days of the 80s and 90s, dark beer was very, very popular because it was basically a backlash to fizzy, yellow, bland corporate beer. And it was huge. That's what people expected craft beer to be and look like. But probably over the last 5 to 10 years, that's really shifted, and people are appreciating that you can make delicious craft beer that isn't dark. And for whatever reason, people are really, really people taste with their eyes as much as That's biologically impossible. Psychologically, it is possible. And for whatever reason, even, you and I are coffee drinkers. People freak out when we tell people we drink really good quality, strong coffee, and we don't actually put cream or sugar in it. That's like a bizarre thought to a lot of people. So I think maybe some of it's just rooted in that. And, again, people of our age with the idea of Guinness, and you couldn't even, back when we were younger, you couldn't even find Guinness, but it was just like, oh, motor oil. Oh, I mean, that doesn't sound appealing. Or saying, oh, a spoon will stand up in there. It's so thick. Again, the reality is it's one of the lightest, wateriest, most insipid beers in the world. It's the Coors Light of stouts. That's my favorite saying about that beer. It sucks. But there's just, again, people don't actually taste it. They just hear this lore and instantly you're like, no, I don't want that. So that's a really long-winded way of... and so, I mean, we ultimately have to sell beer. That's what we do as a commercial business. So we have to, we want to please our audience. But I think there's definitely room for us to try to, keep pushing that envelope. And while we used to have a year-round stout and we've cut it back, I've certainly been re-energized, even more so in the last few weeks. Just taking some time to reread some old books that I've got and some beer industry books. And it's like, I'd like to try to introduce some folks to some more of those types of beers and some more of those historic styles and all that sort of stuff. So that doesn't mean we're going to be revamping our entire core lineup, but it's definitely got me thinking about it, and I definitely am looking forward to some of our fall beers.
One of the things that I've seen a little bit of is your process. So for the last few years, we think really hard about the fall beer, and from my perspective, it's more about marketing. But I think you and the brewers approach it a little bit different. So this year we've got Bunnyhug, that classic German style. We've got Home Grown Heise IPA, which is totally its own thing. And then the ever popular Cat's Got the Cream.
Yep.
And part of me thinks, how did you winnow it down to this lineup? How did you take all those ideas and settle on these?
So to speak specifically about Bunnyhug, I love Oktoberfest style beers. So they're a little darker. Typically you drink them in the fall. They've got just such a complex malt profile to them. It is a German style, so just high quality. I love that. And as much as I love that, the marketability of the whole German thing and dirndls and Lederhosen and the blue and white checkerboard is not very cool here. So I've actually got artwork that we've never used. I had it done about 4 or 5 years ago. And again, as strong as the German heritage here in Saskatchewan is, there's no strong German heritage around beer and around traditional German clothing and art and all that stuff. So I kind of have struggled for years to figure out, how do I make this beer that I love in a way that we can actually market it and sell it. And so yeah, it was probably a few months ago. I was landing on the idea of Bunnyhug, because I try to think, what do people from Saskatchewan love? What's unique about Saskatchewan? Well, Bunnyhug is a pretty obvious one. And again, in my head, I'm like, wow, it's so obvious that someone has obviously already made a Bunnyhug beer before. Well, turns out no one really had. So again, I started working on some more artwork, and it was good artwork, but I didn't love the artwork. And it's no insult to our designer, Brianna. The ideas I was giving her are actually, they're great ideas, but they're not Bunnyhug. So that was my own fault, saying, hey, I want it done like this. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not throwing her under the bus. I gave her a stupid concept that I do want to use at some point again, somewhere down the line, but just not for this beer. Anyways, I'm basically now telling the story of this beer, but it was literally like, I was literally frustrated again, and I'm like, I was like, hey, I've hit a wall. I've got this great name, but I don't know how to design the label. And Wyatt from Flat Clothing just messaged me on Facebook and just said, hey, have you ever thought about doing a Bunnyhug beer? And I don't know about you folks, but if you use social media and whatnot, and even if you literally like are thinking about something, it pops up in your Facebook feed. And I almost had that kind of feeling. I'm like, how does Wyatt know that I'm working on a Bunnyhug beer? But anyways, Wide for Flat Clothing asked, and he was like, hey, I've got these Bunnyhugs and I've got these cool designs. And he's like, I wonder if you'd ever be into making a beer. And I'm like, yes, you've literally solved my problem right now. Thank you very much.
I really want to taste this one. You ready to give her?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Cheers.
So to me, it's just got this like amazing German malt quality. And I've struggled for years, even when I've taught beer classes and education and whatnot, or even judging beers, filling out score sheets, as to how do you describe even maltiness, right? As opposed to, well, it's sweet or it's caramel. But that's where you start getting notes of like bread crust, toastiness, that sort of stuff. It's just, it's more-ish, if that's, sometimes I use that term.
Today that I'm drinking it, this will be my 4th attempt at drinking this, and I don't know why, but to me it's a little bit sweeter.
Yeah, so sometimes it depends, and I notice that too, and I think sometimes that just depends on your perception of what you've been eating or drinking that day. But I certainly noticed that, and I noticed that about just beers in general, and so that's what, is this one of those kind of phenomenons? I'm sure there's, I'd love to give you the scientific information on that. I've just never bothered to research it, but yeah, your perceptions of flavors can change from day to day or hour to hour, depending on what you maybe consumed earlier or later in the day type of a thing.
I feel that I get a lot of toast and bread in the nose, and when I drink it, I almost is like raisins maybe, but not that harsh or aggressive sweetness from a raisin. It's like very faint and
yeah.
chill.
So the beer, the beer in terms of when we'd say it's balanced, it's definitely a malt focused beer. I wouldn't necessarily call it sweet, but it definitely skews to the sweeter, maltier side, and that's how that style is supposed to be. Some can be a little bit drier, but at the end of the day, it's not a heavy beer. It's still a light, easy to drink beer. But I guess, and it's not to discredit a beer like Cat's Got the Cream or say an American red ale or an Irish red ale, but they're going to be more of just like, here's sweetness, here's caramel. That's it. This has that extra toasty, bread crusty kind of thing, and you only get that from like that German malt and that German style of brewing. It's just got that extra complexity, and that elegance is another word I like to use sometimes. I'm looking for that little extra oomph. Just to kind of go back to when I judge beer, there's lots of beers that technically meet all the descriptions of the flavor, but you're like, but it doesn't excite me. It doesn't have that extra wow. It doesn't have that extra complexity or polish or elegance. And it's hard to describe. You have to drink a lot of beer to kind of pick that up, maybe. This beer definitely has that.
I get the feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, every year we do a German-style beer near Oktoberfest, and the impression I get from you is it could be better. There's always something missing. You're always saying, well, this is good, but... And you're always pushing our guys to tweak something.
Yeah, we're continually tweaking this recipe. I love the way it turned out this year, I would say.
Is it the best so far?
I think so. I think we really have that malt character dialed in to what it should be. It smells like a German beer. When I smell it, I can instantly, I'm just like, if you put that blind in a lineup with other German Oktoberfests, it would not stick out like a sore thumb. It would more than hold its own, in my opinion.
I get the feeling, though, and I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
I don't think you're 100% on this beer yet.
Well, so the missing factor, which, it's no great lie, because we don't actually say that it's so typically these would be brewed with lager yeast. And again, I subtly, because some folks have trashed us in the past for some of our beers, saying, well, that's not a true lager. I haven't said that this is a lager by any stretch. It doesn't say that on the can either. We're using ale yeast. We're using American ale yeast. It's a very clean. It's the best way I know to brew a lager, a clean, crisp lager without using lager yeast.
Will we ever use lager yeast?
I would love to. I think about it all the time. So a lager yeast, to make a proper lager beer with lager yeast is going to take probably minimum 8 weeks in a tank. Using our American ale yeast, we're turning that beer over in 5 to 7 days. We only have so many tanks. Time is money. I don't think people would be willing to pay 4 times the price for this beer. So I don't know if you want to say it's a sacrifice. I don't think we're cutting corners. There's just no way to do it, and I'm not going to pretend and say that this is absolutely an authentic German lager, because it is not. It's brewed with ale yeast, but you can still make a pretty darn tasty beer, and I am proud of it. Yes, I would just be over the moon if we could do it. Yes.
The very first time I tasted it, I said, "Wow, this is amazing. I could drink liters of this thing. It is excellent."
Yeah.
Like, I have no complaints about this beer. I have no reservations recommending this to anyone. I would bring this to Thanksgiving supper.
Yeah, like I look forward to drinking I actually was just looking in my beer fridge this afternoon, and I was like, man, I got to stock up on more of this, because it's just all that I want to drink. And so, again, I'm not trying to gloss over the idea of the ale versus lager thing, because it is a significant difference. I would challenge, again, that most drinkers and consumers would not notice. Again, in a blind taste test. Again, if you were an experienced beer judge and really were dialed in, you'd pick it up.
What if one year we did an ale version and a lager version and did them side by side? Do you think we could pick it up?
Oh, I think it would be noticeable if you're doing it side by side. Then you would definitely notice. Not to go way off on a tangent, but there's actually a new yeast coming out. We were talking about it today, and the yeast is called Nova Lager, and so it is a true lager yeast, but it's a bit of a hybrid. It says it ferments faster, and you can ferment it at warmer temperatures. So we're just waiting to get in some of that to try out on our pilot system, and we'll see what we think of it. That might be a bit of a way to kind of get around some of those challenges that we have. I love lagers. I'd love to brew more of them. But yeah, there's always new technology, new things to try.
Is that thought process rooted in the same idea as the Kvik testing that we did? Kind of
Yeah, it's exactly in that. So Kvik and they were trying to push Kvik as the new pseudo lager yeast. I was ultimately very disappointed in all of the ones we've tried. Again, the brewers and I were just chatting this morning. If you go to the yeast manufacturers' websites, they are no longer saying to use those Kvik for pseudo lagers. Now they're highlighting the fruity notes that are in these yeasts, which is exactly why I was disappointed, because they just have all this weird, and in a weird way, in my opinion, you kind of get like a rotting garbage with notes of fruit, and this is not for me. And you can debate it. There's some people that are just like, this is the greatest yeast in the world. I think it's awful, and it certainly does not make a good lager.
I wonder if it's like mint or cilantro, where some people don't taste that rotting garbage character. They just get the fruit.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Because I've had other people say, wow, I love this Kvik beer. And I'm like, really? Like, it hurts me.
Yeah. And it's not just, I have some people like, well, maybe you weren't brewing it properly. I bought every Kvik pseudo lager I could find that was brewed in Manitoba and Alberta over the last year. And they were from some of my favorite breweries. They were not good. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't just the way we did it. They all sucked. And I think what highlights it is that I was recently looking. Nobody is making them anymore, which again I think is very interesting. Kind of like brewed IPA, another thing that just never should have happened.
I didn't really care for brewed IPA.
No, another terrible idea.
The final thought for Bunnyhug was we started marketing it. We started showing people, hey, scan the can, get 15% off on your next online clothing order, all that stuff. And Stephanie said sales were vertical for the next week. People just went ham. I didn't know how it would do, and I wanted to ask you, are you happy with what the results have been so far?
Oh yeah, I'm thrilled so far. I personally love the can design. We're getting great feedback from all sorts of people, and again, it's not to be that people are anyone is superficial, but your first impression is the can. You can't taste it on the shelf, so you're hoping that the can artwork and design draws you in. And like I say, I was very nervous. I've been waiting for years. We've never actually canned our German Oktoberfest Festbier style of beer. This is the first time we've ever done it, because it was finally a design that I felt would be appealing. And so being able to partner with Wyatt and hearing some of that feedback already, is very encouraging, and I hope it becomes a regular thing every year.
The next beer we're going to talk about is, I think, my number one all-time favorite beer for 2022. Like, it's not even close. Home Grown IPA.
Yeah, Home Grown IPA. So this one definitely falls into it's a harvest style ale. One of the first breweries that ever did it in a big way was Sierra Nevada, and they actually call it their Harvest Estate Ale. They actually grow all their barley on site as well as all the hops. I've actually been in those fields, the barley fields and the hop fields, which was pretty cool. And so we're doing we don't quite have estate grown barley and hops. We've got Saskatchewan grown barley and hops. So yes, well I wouldn't say that it necessarily it's certainly it's more in the golden hazy IPA style of a beer. It's definitely time boxed to the fall because that's when those things are harvested, and this is your only. So we haven't necessarily said specifically, but it's a wet hopped beer, and so you make wet hopped beers with fresh hops picked right off the vine, which is typically done in September. So that's when that's your time to make that beer.
I love the Solo Crush wet hops that we've done in the past. I think this eclipses them. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you, what did we learn from those Solo Crushes to get to this point?
I think one of the key things with wet hops is you do get a grassy character from them because they're so fresh. They've been unprocessed. You're getting all of the hop character, and a lot of it is, frankly, vegetal matter. So you get that kind of grassy note that just comes with that. And well, that isn't necessarily a turnoff. Our Solo Crushes were 4.5% alcohol, and there was a lot of those hops there. And so I think that kind of clashed a little bit, and not that they were delicious beers, but it didn't necessarily get people just, going absolutely bananas for them. We had some people that loved them, but not everyone loved it. So in my head, and when you're also doing Solo Crushes, so those were single hops, so we would just we'd go and pick one hop and put it in a can as the Solo Crush. So just kind of, and though that's fine too, but most hops on their own as a single hop they can be delicious, but they're not, they kind of lack that complexity. And so I always think it can be better to combine a couple of hops. Don't combine 20 because then that's just a mess and muddled. There is a point of diminishing returns with combining hops, and they do need to work together. So with the homegrown IPA, we actually picked hops. 1 week we picked Chinook, and the first week was Centennial, and then the very following week, actually it was less than a week, it was maybe only 4 or 5 days later, we picked the Chinooks. So and then we brewed 2 separate batches and then blended them and put it in a can. So this way we're now getting a blend of Centennial and Chinook hops. And we also bumped it up to an IPA strength, 6%. And by doing that, you're just giving it a bit more body and a bit more sweetness, which, again, just kind of softens out that grassy note. And so I think it just gives it a better platform for these wet hops to sit on top of and to showcase them in the best way possible.
When I drink it, when I have that first sip, like the aroma just gets you. So fruity. And then you drink it and it's really, really juicy. And I struggled to describe it. It's like a stone fruit, mango, papaya thing going on, and I love it. And then it's super soft. I'm used to IPAs kind of being bitter and aggressive and punch you in the mouth. And then I know hazies are supposed to be softer, but even compared to our hazy beers in the past, I feel like this is unique unto itself.
Yeah, it's softer than our hazy IPA. I've tasted them side by side. As much as I think our hazy IPA is quite soft compared to a lot of the other ones on the market. Again, the big difference in that is that we do use whole leaf hops in all of our hoppy beers, whereas most breweries are using pellets. And pellets you can make delicious beers with pellets, but they do contribute a lot more polyphenols in the hazy type beers, which contributes to a bit of harshness and bitterness.
That's what gives the harshness that I'm not tasting is.
Yeah, so you're missing all of that because there are polyphenols in fresh hops and whole leaf hops, but just in a much smaller quantity. By pulverizing them into that pellet, you're basically exposing the polyphenols to, and so if more of them end up in the beer itself. Also with the pellets and in a hazy IPA, it's an unfiltered, uncentrifuged beer. So if you're using pellets are so fine, you're literally just drinking hop pellets. And I don't know if anyone's had the opportunity to chew on a hop pellet. You will regret it for the next 8 hours. They are bitter and harsh and nasty. You do not. And so you're literally just drinking the pellets themselves. Again, that doesn't mean that I'm not trashing all hazy IPAs brewed with pellets, but I pick that up. That's where you get those things like hop burn and all that kind of stuff. That's where that comes from. It comes from excessive amounts of pellet hops in a hazy IPA.
I was telling a friend, turn over the can, rotate it, swirl it very gently, and then pour it for the full character, full effect, and a nice even pour between like 2 glasses if you're sharing.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I do that at home. I take one out of the fridge and I literally just turn it upside down instantly before I even grab a glass, then give it a gentle swirl. I usually pour about 3/4 of it and then try and swirl it, give it a more aggressive swirl to make sure I'm agitating the yeast, pour the rest in.
I'm going to be so sad when this one is gone. We didn't make that much, did we?
Yeah, we made 2 batches. That's it, right? That's so again, it's special. It only lasts for a very small amount of time, and that's it. So enjoy it while you can. But yeah, just in terms of it being, again, so it's got that very soft profile. If you're expecting a punch in the face, bitter West Coast style, you're going to be horribly disappointed. But it's not a wimpy beer either. There was a walking tour with some urban planners. I think about 30 of them came by the brewery. And we poured them each a sample of that, and they're not beer aficionados. And I said, "Don't drink this if you don't like it." I'm not going to get offended. After they left, every glass was emptied, and I took that as a great compliment. These are not beer drinkers, and they crushed their samples like it was no big deal.
I feel like this one is a great way to explain to people that IPA is not just a punch in the mouth. It can be so much more.
And it's been You're 100% right. In a lot of the other, especially down in the U.S., hazy IPAs are huge. They're big, massively popular. It's still been a bit of a slow burn here because, again, there's still that old school thought that, it's going to be bitter and gross and I'm not going to like it. We've been trying to debunk that, and we're trying to debunk it again here now. But yeah, it's a very, very crowd-pleasing type of a beer. If you've never tried an IPA before, or you think you don't like IPAs, I would really recommend giving this one a try. It is fantastic.
One of the things we haven't talked about yet is the fact that it's 100% Saskatchewan-grown, Saskatchewan malted barley, and 100% Saskatchewan hops. Like, this is as local as it gets for anything that's currently in the Saskatchewan market.
Absolutely, yeah. So the hops themselves are from JGL Shepherd Hops in Fleming, Saskatchewan. We haven't really talked about the barley a whole lot yet, but that's from Maker's Malt in Rostern. So we work with Justin and Matt on both of those, and the product is great. I mean, Matt's been pumping out great malted barley out of his malt house there. And it was nice to be able to do. We've never done a beer with 100% of his product, and this was the first time we did it, and so it was a lot of fun working with them. I've known both of them for a long time. We've kind of been dreaming about how do we make this a thing and get Saskatchewan excited about stuff. So it's that whole I'm not trying to gloss over it, but it's that whole idea of community and celebrating local products and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot to be proud about.
I like drawing the connections between urban and rural and showing people that we're all in this together, and it's not some faceless mega corporation. We get to walk out in the fields, shake the farmer's hand. We know the guys who are malting on a first name basis. We can call them up on the phone or shoot them a text message. It's not some random faceless sales rep or a corporate shareholder guy who's like, just give me my money and leaves. Like, these guys legitimately are obsessed with quality. I love talking to Justin, and he's teaching me about extra stuff about hops that I'd never heard before.
Yeah, anytime you actually get some one-on-one time with a farmer, I always say I'm way smarter afterwards. I'm just like, thank you so much. I just have so much more appreciation. So yeah, it's a special thing, and I think it's meaningful to the farmers too, right? To see their products be celebrated and acknowledged and hyped in Saskatchewan. I'm not going to pretend to fully understand the agriculture industry, but for most farmers, they grow these inputs, and they get shipped off overseas to other markets for pennies. Frankly, we're trying to create a bigger movement around agri-value, doing more processing here, consuming more of the products here. Show me a better industry to do that with than beer, because I don't see it, to be honest. So let's get excited about this stuff.
We had a farmer in the tap room, and he and I were talking about locally sourced barley and how it comes from Bigger Saskatchewan or Roster in Saskatchewan. And I told him, we get to turn it into gold medal beers. We get to make your product. We handle your product and you've cared so much about this product. You cared so much. You babied it all the way through. And we didn't just go and turn it into Twinkies. We went and won gold medals with it. And you could see his face light up and his eyes kind of shine. And he's like, yeah, gold medal.
Exactly. Like, feel good about it. And just, to tie in that sense of community. I mean, I made a trip up to Saskatoon a few weeks ago, and I saw Dave Klinger at lunch. He's with Prairie Malt out of Bigger. And then right after lunch, maybe about an hour later, I ran into Matt Enns from Maker's Malt. And I had some of the homegrown beer with me, and I'm like, Matt, I got the beer. You got to try it. I had to run. I said, enjoy. I got to run. But, I mean, how much better does that get? I wasn't going up there expecting to see either of them that day. Yeah, that just shows you that connection, and that we're Saskatchewan is a pretty small place, and that's a thing to celebrate, right?
If people recall, Dave Klinger is a past guest on the podcast. We've talked about barley. Matt Enns is also a past guest on the podcast, and you can go look up their respective episodes and find out more about what they're doing with barley. The last beer I wanted to jump into, Cat's Got the Cream. This one is always a huge hit in the fall. I wanted to ask you, do you think it's going to do the same thing this year?
I think so. We keep wondering if it's ever going to, people are going to get bored of it or sick of it, but they don't. So thank you. I do think it's a pretty darn good beer. Not that it's, official or scientific or anything, but Untappd is the biggest beer rating site in the world, or it's an app you can use on your phone. This is the highest rated spiced beer in Canada. That feels pretty darn good.
When I smell it, the aroma is completely different from Bunnyhug. Like you look at the color, you compare them, fairly similar in color, but not even close in aroma and flavor.
Yeah, I've had the, so when we decided to put out Bunnyhug this year, and even, we're just looking at we have the glasses here just sitting on the desk right now while we're chatting. I am concerned about some overlap. So they both are more of a malt forward, amber, dark orange ready type of beer coming out in the fall. And I was a little worried that, and we've actually even seen questions from customers saying, is that the same beer? What's the difference? If you have them side by side, they are completely different beasts. Completely different. So you can really highlight the differences in that the Bunnyhug, again, it's a German-focused beer. It's on that elegance and nuance of the malt itself, that breadiness and toastiness that comes through. Cat's Got the Cream is what we would call, it's got Mexican vanilla added to a kind of a caramel cream-based beer. Lovely in its own right. It gets more of that complexity and elegance from the unique Mexican vanilla we use. It's almost got a bit of a baking spice note, so people typically say cinnamon or nutmeg, allspice, those types of things.
Yeah, allspice and vanilla as heck.
Yeah,
so much vanilla. Did we amp it up this year?
No, we left the dosage the same. We usually, when we brew the first batch every year, we usually just do a quick taste test on the dosage rate based on what we did the year previously. But, again, vanilla is an agricultural product, so it can change from year to year. The barley that's in the beer can also change from year to year. So we just always want to do that check and say, is this in the ballpark of where it was last year? Does it feel good? Does it feel out of balance? So this is what we went with. I'm really happy with this year's version. I've had a few pints out and about at restaurants, and it's just a fantastic. I mean, it just screams fall flavors. Whatever you think of, let's talk about pumpkin beers first, because actually my wife mentioned to me last night. She's like, "There's no pumpkin beers anymore," and I was like, "Yeah, good." Like,
I fucking hate pumpkin beers.
Yeah, so my biggest issue, in my opinion, with pumpkin beers is that pumpkin has no flavor. It's literally it's like a potato, right? It's starch. It doesn't taste like anything. So why are you adding it to a beer? You're just adding a bunch of unfermentable starch and haze and nastiness that can get contaminated and blow up your cans. So I see no point to that. And then, you're just adding, and I shouldn't say everyone's adding garbage spices or this or that, but you got to add good spice flavors if you're going to do something like that. So this is definitely in the realm of that. It doesn't have pumpkin specifically, and we're using a bit of a spiced Mexican vanilla. But I like the way that this beer works way better than any pumpkin beer I've ever come across.
Why, to me, does it feel so much heavier than Home Grown or Bunnyhug?
So that's done intentionally, the way we brew that beer. Again, I would say this, if we were going to actually try to give it a classic style in terms of the base beer itself, it would be like an Irish red or an American red ale. Those are going to have a higher finishing gravity than the German style Bunnyhug. So most German beers are they're meant to be drank in mass quantities. They really focus on that. Again, some beer geeks get mad at the term drinkability, as if to say, if it doesn't have high drinkability, it's not drinkable whatsoever. But to me, it's the concept that it's meant to be consumed in large volumes. And it's not that you can't drink Cat's Got the Cream in large volumes, but when we talk about finishing gravity, that's how much typically residual sugar is left in the beer, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's sweeter. It just means that it's the body of the beer, the mouthfeel. And this one has a higher finishing gravity, and that's done intentionally for this style of beer.
It feels like I could replace a slice of cake with a pint for dessert.
Yeah.
And be so happy.
Exactly. I'm not going to tell you that this is a replacement for pumpkin spice latte, because it's not that heavy. It's not that sweet by any stretch, but it should remind you of that, right? It's got the vanilla, it's got the caramel, it's got the creaminess, it's got more body than some beers. And yeah, it's a fantastic dessert beer. We were actually at a Greek restaurant, Philosophy, in Saskatoon on the weekend. We just had it with our appetizers and main course, and it was phenomenal. That flavor profile is common even in Greek in the entrees, right? Like moussaka and stuff like that. It's common to have a bit of cinnamon in the ground beef mixture and whatnot. So it can work with a lot of different foods, but definitely I would definitely recommend it as a dessert beer. Yeah, but on its own, it's fine too.
We get asked about this beer all year round. And I've explained to people, absinthe makes a heart grow fonder. And it's really, really great for fall and winter. And then it has to go by.
Yeah, I mean, folks always get mad at us, and I'm not saying they're wrong. But there's the whole psychology where people say, oh yeah, I would totally buy it all year round. Right? If you did a survey. We did a survey, they'd say, yes, we'll buy it all year round. And then we would make it all year round, and no one would buy it in spring and summer. And we say, well, but the survey says you would buy it. Humans are terrible at actually predicting their behaviors. Anyways, that's a whole other tangent. I'm sure there's lots of podcasts that can dive into that.
Do you think we would ever do it full time if we got big enough?
I have no interest in doing it. I love the idea that it's time boxed. I love the idea, that we don't call it a pumpkin beer. We don't call it a Christmas beer. We don't call it a Thanksgiving beer. But you know what? You can drink it at the beginning of fall. You can drink it at Christmas. You can drink it at Halloween. You can drink it at Thanksgiving. And it actually fits all of those themes perfectly. It does not fit sitting on a beach in July. It just doesn't.
I had a friend buy 2 flats last year and hoard them so he could have his Cat's Got the Cream all year long. couple months ago, he's like, I'm drinking my last one. When does it come back out? And I'm like, you still have to wait another month and a half. And he's like, oh, that's too long. But it's his number one. It's his fave.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always the hardcore folks that are really bonkers, and we love that. I mean, it feels great that people are that obsessive about it. But yeah, I think there's value in that I don't want to say scarcity, but just in that seasonality of it. It's special and something to look forward to.
Bunnyhug, I love it, and somebody already asked me, please do it again next year.
I mean, if you ask me, I'm going to make it again next year. Yeah.
Yeah?
It's on my list. Yeah.
Okay, I'll let them know, because I told them I'd ask you for the podcast today to confirm.
Yeah, I mean, unless we can't sell the remaining beer in the next few months here, I'm planning to make more of it next year for sure.
Steph said it was like flying off the shelves. Stores are reordering like a few days after they'd already brought it in.
Yeah, for sure. I think, again, I mean, I'm not the only one that decides what beers we make here, but, and we do have broad tastes here at Rebellion, but it's always a lot easier for anyone to sell a beer if they love it, if they already love it, and I can tell you that a lot of people, a lot of the staff love Bunnyhug, including myself. So that there certainly sways our opinion on it. I can't, there's everyone has their favorites. I mean, overwhelmingly, and I've mentioned it before, I know we're not, Zilla IPA absolutely destroys it in our tap room, and it's a lot, our staff and our friends, for whatever reason, just there's a ton of Zilla lovers there. And not that we don't make a ton of other good beers, but yeah, like it outsells any other beer 2-1 in the tap room.
I don't know why that is. I love Zilla too, and it feels like that hardcore slice bought into it and digs it. Yep. The other thing I was thinking about these fall beers is each of them is vastly different, and so for a fall strategy, I find that interesting. You said, okay, we're going to launch a lineup of beers to hit those cooler winter months and fall months, and here's 3 examples of something that's completely different from the other. Nothing's close.
Yeah, again, I think to your point, we don't make these beers any other time of year. And it's something to look forward to. And again, I think again, in terms of selling beer and also in terms of what I personally want to drink, timing is everything. Like I said, most people don't want to drink Cascot's Cream in the middle of summer. They just don't. But it comes out in September, and people are like, yeah, that's exactly what I want right now. Thank you very much.
Final thought. Where are your thoughts drifting now? Where does your mind drift in terms of the next 6 months for beer?
For beer that we're putting out? So honestly, I'm already started working on can designs for our spring and summer beers. So I'm already working on that, our spring and summer lineup. We're already buying fruit for our fruit beers for spring and summer. We've gotten a bunch of it delivered already. Again, that's, you got to be way ahead of the game, even more so than ever, because fruit is becoming so scarce and so expensive. So I wish I wasn't buying fruit right now, because that's tying up a lot of our money, but that's just the way things go. But in terms of stuff maybe a little more timely, I mean, we've still got a pile of winter beers to come out. We try to shift again to quite dark beers, heavier, stronger, bigger alcohol beers. Again, that's the right beer for when it gets really cold. That's what you want. You're indoors. You've got a sweater on. You want something a little heartier, a little thicker. And you also run into the holiday season in December, where it is that festive, celebratory thing. You want something a little special, a little more exotic and full-flavored and robust. And so, we've got I don't know how many, another 4, 5, 6. We like making lots of beers, and I've told people, as long as you keep buying them, we'll keep making them. Variety is the spice of life. We ultimately need to sell them, or otherwise we just have a bunch of what do they call them? They call them shelf turds. Because I don't want those winter beers on the shelf again in next summer. That's a shelf turd. Nobody's gonna buy it. So again, it's part art, part science as to how much to make and how many different beers to make. But we're pretty jacked up. There's a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipe. I'm trying to think of how many brand new ones. I want to say there's at least 3. I want to say there's at least 3 brand new ones we've never made before.
That's deadly.
Yep. And that's all. And we want all of those out, by, beginning of December. Because again, we want you to be able to enjoy them over the Christmas. And then, if you really enjoyed one, you can still get some more for January and February. And then again, it's just like clockwork now. It's time to clean the slate. And it's like, hey, let's go. Time for spring. Time to lighten things up again.
It's too early to think about spring for me.
I know it is, but yeah, I have to be thinking about that. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I have a real point, but that's one of the things that I just love about beer is that seasonality. If you're a winemaker, you make your wine every fall with the grapes, and then you just sit around, and that's the only wine you have to drink for the whole year. It's kind of boring. It's kind of like there's nothing else you can do.
You're saying that beer is more exciting.
Well, yeah, it's without question. That others is this dull? Or if you make whiskey, well, you make whiskey. Okay, great. What's your spring whiskey? Well, the whiskey that we made whenever we made the whiskey. It's the same damn whiskey.
7 years ago.
Yeah, same whiskey we made 7 years ago, whether it's spring or summer or fall or winter. Beers, I mean, honestly, and I'm serious. Like, I can't think of any other beverage that has that seasonality to it. It's amazing. So embrace it and enjoy it and live it up.
Deadly. Thanks for your time today, man.
Yeah, this was fun.